Hey, everybody, welcome to the History Automation Podcast. My name is Sean Tierney, and I'm joined again by my co host, Gary Wilkinson. You guys remember him from all the previous episodes. And today we have a very special guest, Joe Malter. And we kind of bumped into each other on LinkedIn talking about the old SyMax. I had someone donate to me, and for the life of me, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but somebody donated a SyMax 300, I believe. And I've never used SyMax. You guys know my history is Alan Bradley, at least for the first 25 years. And so we get talking back and forth. I'm like, Joe, can you come on the show and tell us about some of these old products? And I know he's actually talked to some of his old colleagues. And so we look forward to talking about that and more over the next, maybe hour of time. And with that, Joe, I'm going to go ahead and put you in the spotlight and just ask you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us about your first job in automation working with SquareD.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. I'm Joe Malter. I'm with Veris Associates. I started my career in 1982, right out of college from the University of Wisconsin. I think you could see right up there, a little logo up there. And SquareD was headquartered in Milwaukee on the north side of town with Alan Bradley on the south side. I got into automation kind of in through co-op job. Worked at the Oscar Mayer meat plant in Madison, Wisconsin. And I got involved in an automated line, and they handed me an ISSC PLC, which really had no visual programming thing. This is 1980. So you're looking at a little screen, and you're looking at step 1, step 2, rung 1, cell 1. Somebody had written the program, and I was just double checking it and helping starting it up. So I kind of had a little interest in PLCs. And when I graduated in 82, it was a kind of a tough job market. But when I was interviewing with SquareD and I knew what a PLC was, and by the way, back then, it was a PC, programmable controller. In 82, there were no personal computers. I mean, Apple II had one, but I don't think it really got branded until IBM a couple of years later. Yep. So kind of started out with PCs. I mean, Alan Bradley, I think the PLC 2 was considered a PLC. But so I was the second group of automation engineers for SquareD.
Wow.
There was a first group of 6, and then I was the second group 6 months later or so, thereabout. And at that point, the SyMax hadn't come out. And by the way, by history, PLC 5 wasn't out yet. No. I was working on something called the 8881 PLC, which was a big chassis PLC, and a SyMax 20. Now I went back and talked to some of my old colleagues from SquareD. There's a couple of them still working. Jerry Bartolome up in the Northwest, and Robert Willis down in Houston. And they were automation guys, still are, had a lot of good history. And they reminded me that in about 1982, there was really only 3 PLC companies that kind of dominating. It was Alan Bradley, Modicon, and SquareD, each with roughly about a third of the market. GE had I don't know when the Series 6 came out. TI had the 505, which was hugely popular. Mm-hmm. Those may have been later in the 80s. So yeah, it was fun. I'm kind of brainwashed. We helped bring out the Model 300 and a Model 100 in 1982, 83, and had some pretty great product. I think the PLC 5 came out several years later, so there was kind of a unique spot in the market.
Yeah, now this was before my time, but the PLC 5 came out in 1986. The model number is 1785, so we all, you'd think it would come out in 85, but Alan Bradley was going through the acquisition by Rockwell. And so the PLC 5 came out in 86, and it was really a game changer for Rockwell because of just the ease of use. Like it wasn't just a flat memory table. You had to memorize what's in Word 200, what's in memory register 400, what's in 300, like the PLC2 was. And programming the SyMax, and we were trading pictures. I was showing you some pictures of the donation we had. Um, it looked a lot like the PLC5 or the mini PLC2 system, in pretty developed for the early 80s. And but programming wise, I've never programmed one. Can you talk a little bit about? I'm sure it was DOS based programming.
Yeah, the original SyMate programming was DOS
Oh,
based.
okay.
Well, actually, before that, it was just like, what was it, T30 or I don't know what the Rockwell uh, dedicated programming terminal. That's what was SquareD had initially until maybe 85 or 86 when DOS came out, IBM PCs, compacts, luggables were real popular. They had a little 6-8 inch screen, but they were little suitcases. Those were the first programming terminals we used.
Yeah, if you go all the way back to the late 60s and look at the programming terminals for some of the very first PLCs, they're huge. They're these huge boxes. And over time, they grew handles like with Rockwell, it was the T3, T1, T2, T3,
Yeah.
T3. But the T3 was the one I think most people are familiar with, programming the PLC2. And it was very heavy,
Yeah.
just, just bulletproof.
I was
Very
reading those things on airplanes.
I worked with a gentleman, great guy, Dan. He once he had to go to the Gulf of Mexico or Gulf of America now, and he had to bring the T3 with him. And as he was done working. He was getting on the elevator to go back down to wherever he had to go to get the boat, and it shook, and the T3 went into the into the Gulf. And it's like, oh, that was like, I don't know, maybe 10 grand. I don't know. Just it's a very sad day to see something so expensive, go into the deep waters. But yeah, very heavy. And did usually not the most user friendly device.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't too bad. Alan Bradley originally was, DOS based, and really ICOM kind of dominated the software space, I think, for Rockwell. And then they finally bought him, and I think that became the Factory Talk line.
Eventually, yes. After we went through the RS series, there was just so many years of RS. Everything was RS for Rockwell software. But yeah, it came, yeah.
Yeah, so SquareD had a lot of firsts. Um, they had a peer network, SyNet,
Oh,
that ran at 500K, and you could do PLC to PLC communications. And this is, from the first issue of Model 300s. At first to have Ethernet. In 86, it was a coax, and boy, those, arguments about deterministic and non-deterministic networks, and how could you have Ethernet on a production floor? But we put in a lot of them. There's a couple other really cool things. You could upload and download programs over any media, over radio, over satellite. The pure comms was multi-level, so you could have independent networks, but link them together and route from one network to the other. Actually, and I don't really remember this, but this is what Robert Willis reminded me. He said you could save the program documentation in the PLC.
oh,
I mean, you couldn't even do that with Rockwell, even control logics until version 25? The doc, yeah. So, it has some pretty good bursts, but I think what happened in the industry, if we just look at the industry in general, SquareD concentrated more on the commercial business line than the industrial automation. From their MCCs and everything were geared towards commercial and not industrial. And Alan Bradley was 100% industrial, and kind of hurt us. The manager I worked for at SquareD once told me we sell more in QO circuit breakers in a day than we sell automation in a year. said, okay, well, that really helps me feel good about my career.
Well,
But we did some.
I mean, SquareD is a big circuit breaker company still today, right? I mean, the SquareD
Very
circuit
much
breakers.
so.
Yeah.
I mean, I drove by, Chick-fil-A, and, you're going through the drive-through, and here's a big SquareD switchgear on the side. It's brand, this one's probably a year or two old. So, SquareD's still around.
It's funny. Every time I fly take a flight, I'm always looking to see who's HMI. It's usually Magellan or Schneider, right? One of the Schneider models. But it's funny who got the HMI there, or if I'm at a theme park, always looking for the automation.
Yeah, so PLCs kind of went into what they bought, Telemechanique.
Yeah.
I think in the late 80s, and it wasn't too much longer, they got Modicon. Is all when it converted over to when Schneider bought SquareD.
Mm-hmm.
So those all kind of merged together.
Yeah, very interesting that a lot of the SquareD applications were not in industrial. Um, can you give us an example of one of those commercial applications for a PLC? Because I think a lot of us think like factory automation, right? And you and I were talking about, God.
I was going to say, not necessarily commercial, but here's a commercial one that we did, like a 10-story hospital at a load shed. It needed to reduce if there's a power outage, and they moved over to generators,
Yep.
the ride through and breaking down the big loads and then staging them back up. And, you got fans that are controlling surgery rooms, things, that are highly critical, that just staging them up. So we used distributed racks throughout the hospital with the SyMax PLC down in a equipment room with the generators and such. And I wonder where HMI. I think it's currently, and it's been changed to Rockwell over the years, but that was an early application. But some other fun ones were at NORAD. I got to go to NORAD in 1986 for their diesel generators that were their primary power source in the mountain. They had utility, but that was considered backup. So that was kind of they had, I don't remember which SyMax were on it, but there was 6 diesel generators, and they had SyMax PLCs on them.
Joe, where is NORAD located? Is it still in the same place? Where was it? You visited?
Oh, NORAD's buried in the Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado.
Okay.
You got to go through heavy security, obviously, and drive into the mountain.
So I think you mentioned the year 1986. You visited?
Yes, because I know exactly.
And so America was introduced to NORAD. Probably there was a movie, 1983. I'm not going too far off topic. 1983 to 84, called War Games. So whenever you say the word NORAD, I'm sure. I saw that Roderick movie, and fantastic and amazing as ever.
Well, here's what, if you're a techie, you've probably seen the movie Tron.
Yeah.
Right? That's I don't know when Tron was, an 80s movie?
I think it's later 80s for some reason. Yeah. 80s, definitely, yeah.
So
those were my teenage years. Yep. I love that.
That was filmed at Lawrence Livermore National Labs. And that was the...
legendary, too.
Yeah, that was a laser ignition system. And I was involved in a lot of PLCs for that. So if you look at that, this, it's a bunch of lasers that shoot on this 12-foot diameter sphere. Mm-hmm. And the sphere has tools on it. These tools are, pieces of equipment that measure, whatever they measure as the explosion goes on inside this chamber. So they had a PLC on each one of these tools that would handle like the valve switching to get the vacuum and atmosphere proper for the tool setup. So that was, kind of fun. I got to go into NORAD, into Lawrence Livermore Labs and see that. Now they have a NIF, National Ignition Fusion Reactor, and that's all Allen Bradley. That was a big Rockwell job. What else? Tron. My first real big SquareD job And when I moved from working for SquareD to the end client, to a integrator, was for Hills Brothers Coffee. It was the largest coffee plant in the world. It was in Suffolk, Virginia, and I worked for a company called Pipeline Systems, PSI, who happened to, by the way, is one of the founding CSIA member companies.
Really? Okay.
I'll tell you more about that if you're interested, but it was Hills Brothers. I was the application engineer working with PSI on the Hills Brothers project, and they were desperate for some PLC help. And I was already seeing the handwriting on the wall that SquareD really wasn't putting the effort in the PLCs. And it was time to, do this, work for this exciting engineering company doing a grassroots, greenfield plant. And I was in charge of all of the coffee roasters and what they call whole roast. So that was a big SyMax installation. I think we had 15. I think they were in model 500s or 600s. I can't remember, but
Okay.
Yeah, quite a few with Metra. I don't know if Metra was the HMIs. They were out of San Jose. We had a whole bunch of those, and we had an Oracle database doing, sort of MES type capabilities and pushing stuff down. So here's an interesting one for SquareD that was pretty neat. It's still a patent of theirs. When they came out with this SyNet, they had a ISA board, PCI board that went inside your computer that would connect up to the network. It's kind of like a KT card would be for DH Plus.
Yep.
But the cool thing about this board is it had dual memory. So you could get information from the PLC into the computer. And they wrote a Lotus 123, the predecessor to Excel, where you could get live data into Lotus 123. And I built this advanced spreadsheet to be able to keep track of the 40 whole roast bins where the coffee went and which roaster was sending the coffee to which bin. And you could see all the interaction live in a spreadsheet. And this is 1991. So it was pretty advanced for its day. SquareD had patented that, and then there were a number of patent infringements. So I think they made a lot of money from that. From I think what is it? Licensing out the patent.
Sure. That's really interesting too. So you think you got this ISA card or ISA card in your PC. It's talking to the PLC or all the PLCs on Ethernet, right?
Yeah.
And, I think it'd be interesting someday to have a conversation just on why people were so afraid of Ethernet and non-determinism. But that's for another day. I remember those arguments very, very vividly. But and so it's grabbing all this data from the PLCs, talking to the PLCs, and its memory is wide open for applications on your computer where you can just grab it and just like there's no DDE, OPC, there's no interchange, there's no RS links. You just it's all right there. And the speed, I imagine it must have been, as soon as the card had it, you had it in Lotus.
It
must have been blazing fast.
I had a big argument with that had a SquareD PLCs on it because the board was a couple $1,000s. Lotus 123 was what, $300, $400, maybe $500, and he thought this software was so unique he charged $2,000.
Oh.
I said, they got to buy the board, give it away, make it nominal. Hardly sold any. But if you're a controls guy, and you just convince your manager to let you get a $2,000 board to go into your PC, $500 for your Lotus 123, and oh, by the way, I need $2,000 to tie it together. Back in 1990, you're not getting that kind of money.
No.
So they sold very few of them.
Yeah. And, I think that's one of the things we've learned over the years is that the hits and misses, right? The commercial or marketing decisions that companies make, the ones that really go really well, and the ones that don't go so good. And there's a lot of I remember, and I'll try to not be specific. I was in a meeting at a major vendor back in years ago, and they were kind of like being funny. They're like, "Oh, I'm glad," and I'll just say Bob because I don't know who the guy was. I'm glad Bob talked us into creating a PCI card for motion control because we sold like 5 of them. Glad we spent millions of dollars investing in that.
Mhm.
So that's it, right? It's like, you know, companies make decisions and then their products either live or die because of that. And I think, one of the reasons Rockwell bought Icom was because of the Windows programming software. It was just miles above DOS. Yeah.
Yeah, when I switched from began with the PSI system integration, um, quickly became primarily Rockwell, and that's all the software we used was ICOM at the time.
Did you get in on the Wintelligent when it first came out? Like Wintelligent Logix 5? Or did you wait until Rockwell had bought them to make the switch to Windows?
I think we waited till Rockwell bought them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean on the came RS View. I think ICOM had a graphic package that did
WinView, yeah.
Yeah, and then that morphed into RS View, RS View 32. It's ME or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Well, I was actually in a WinView training class with a Rockwell guy and a good distributor friend because the Rockwell guy kind of signed up last minute because Rockwell had brought him. He's like, well, now I need to know this product. So I'm going to go to the ICOM class to learn about the Wintelligence series. And during that class, WinView, action reaction, it was okay, right? But
yeah,
it was Windows. Rockwell didn't really have anything Windows. So Rockwell comes in and shows us RS View, which would become RS View 32 and then Factory Talk View. And RS View, like I signed up to be a beta user right then and there. When they did their demo, it was like miles above. And I didn't know In Touch at the time. I don't know how it compared to that at the time, but it was miles above the ICOM Windows stuff, miles above the old Control View stuff. And it was just like, and again, it had its growing pains too. Not to say it was a perfect package, but it was an exciting time. That was like in the mid 90s.
Yeah, my first HMI was, I think, called React 1 or 2, and it was a dedicated machine. And then Screenware. Early 80s. So Screenware was the first PC software I ever used, and I think it was DOS-based. And you draw your graphics, and you assign, it was pretty primitive base graphics, and then you had each element had a name, and then you wrote like scripting language to tell that element what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you drew a picture of a valve and you called it valve 1, you'd go in the scripting language and you'd say valve 1 equals green. I mean, based on some, you built your tag name, your tag base to your PLCs, and then you'd write, the language to tell it what to do. And that was the early, graphic systems, probably the mid 80s, and prior to Wonderware kind of dominating, and what was it? Fix and Involution Fix and Fix 32, another early one. I mean, I still have some, I don't know why, CDs, or there would be CDs probably of Wonderware 5.6B, which I think was the first Windows NT compatible. So multitask,
right?
Because they were all single tasking at that point. And I did a really large oil and gas project. It was GATX pipeline. It's now Kinder Morgan. A couple of pipelines from Tampa to Orlando with some intermediate valve sites. And that was a big SquareD SyMax job. And Wonderware on Windows NT with satellite communications and all kinds of fun stuff. My biggest regret on that job, that was in, what was that, 96, 97?
Okay.
Is They were laying a new pipeline from Tampa to Orlando. And at PSI, we had another division that did fiber optic. And they're like, we need to lay fiber optic cable down that pipeline. And the client was hell-bent on using satellites. I think we put in 22 or 23 satellite sites for intermediate stations. I think if we had put fiber in, they could have made more money off that fiber than off their fuel pipeline. Because in the 90s, and there was just a race to put fiber in the ground. The internet was just barely getting going. Yeah, and have that right anyway, and trenched between two major cities would have been huge.
I think the web browser was invented in 90 or thereabouts. So yeah, the internet, really took off because of the web browser, right?
Yeah.
So just a history about as I interrupt, just Sean, Tim Berners-Lee of the CERN in Switzerland, I think, created would be known as the HTML in 89 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And the internet is just generally credited to Netscape, Mark Andreessen, probably 94. But there's, of course, a lot of stuff in between there, shall we say. And, those were kind of the big moments because, of course, Netscape went public. And that was big news, the first big internet. So he does get some credit for it, not the first browser, but somewhere in between there, those two guys stand out at the kind of the beginning. And, that year, 94, 95 was something in the internet days, right? So, Joe, just the comment about race for fiber, just reminds you of today's race for AI energy.
Yes.
Just 20 years later.
I'm in the Bay Area. AI is huge here. San Francisco is starting to boom again because of all of the
awesome. Good to hear.
Yeah. So Sean, you made a comment about SquareD being in kind of a different PLCs being in kind of a different markets, but really the biggest market was automotive. Okay, SquareD did some stuff with I think primary press control. I don't know with who, GM or Ford, one of those, and had some dedicated products for it and welder controls. And one of the things that really made me not like SquareD, wanting to get out of there, was at an all integration meeting. And one of the product managers said, there is no other market than automotive. That's all we're building for. And I'm in California. I don't know what was down in Southern California. I didn't have Southern California. I didn't have any of the plants that were down there. And the plant here in Northern California was closing at the time, which became New United Mayors.
Right. Amazing.
And then that shut down, and now it's Tesla.
Right. Exactly. Very good history. I actually know people work and still do at the Tesla plant. Of course, the headquarters famously moved to Texas, but the plant is still there as far as I know.
Yep. Right off the 680.
I understand automotive is such a big part of the push for programmable controllers. And I think part of the reason is if you look at any other product you have, first of all, at the time, late 60s, 70s, 80s, that was the number one besides a house. It really was the biggest expenditure people were buying, right? And it was a product like a house. It's usually built on site, especially at that time, you're not doing a lot of modular homes, right? A home's built in place, everything's delivered to site, it's constructed, where a vehicle is your biggest consumer product. And it has just a very complicated product. It's not a toaster. It's not a blender. It's extremely complicated, even in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, even more so today. But I think, while they needed automation because the complicated assembly and lots of testing and checking, a lot of dangerous welding too, presses to make the parts, stamp out process, injection molding, right? So you just go down the list. But, I think a lot of automation companies says, you know what, we want to go after automotive. They're big, but everything we do there, think injection molding, pressing, all this stuff is used in all the industries, right? I mean, a little different. You might get like the, bakeries don't have much in common with presses as maybe with the painting process they would have more in common with. But it's like you if you're good at automotive, you're probably may not be good at process, but you'll probably be good at almost everything else.
So if you look back at the original PLCs, they were primarily discrete equipment for interlocks and things. And SquareD had a predecessor to all the PLCs called NORPAC,
Okay.
which were these solid state and and OR gates that you put little jumper cables in. UOP, big oil and gas company used those for, I don't know about probably safety interlocks, where unless you lose a jumper or you lose a NORPAC item, you've got pretty set logic. And then the PLC came around where it became more flexible. You can make those changes, literally on the fly. I think PLCs expanded beyond automotive and some of that when analog processing started to come into play. You started getting analog and PID loops and things within PLCs. I did a cement plant, and I didn't know they were coming like from a Bailey Net 90 or something. I don't know what kind of system they had, and they put in a SyMax 600, I think, and then they come and tell us, hey, we need to have 100 PID loops in this thing. How can we do it? It's like, oh my gosh, so I wrote a nested routine that would cycle through, because you scan times in PLC was fast, and you could loop through and generate enough PID loops to be able to handle that.
Is the reason you did that, was it a memory issue? Like if you would have brute forced it, would have taken up too much memory or too much scan time?
Probably memory and scan time, and just probably ugly.
And most PID loops do not have to be very fast updates,
right? Yeah,
for like a water tower, or for there's certain temperature is not going to change fast.
Yeah, so this is the first time I worked in a cement plant. The yard, football field long kiln. Putting the slag down, and and it's kind of funny because they bring out like an 8-gauge shotgun, water cooled shotgun, to blow the rock that it's building up if it builds up, and say, oh no, what did I do in my programming? Is this how you need to bring a shotgun to no, this happens kind of all the time with it. And that was kind of a neat application. When I first, you come out of college and you start to work for a vendor, and you get branded with like, okay, we got the greatest product out there, go out and sell it. And it's kind of funny. And, I went through a year-long training in Milwaukee, and come out to San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, and stuff. ISA was the Instrumentation of Society at that point. Now it's a International Site Automation. It was big. People went to these trade shows, local trade shows. You get 1,000 people. That's where you learned about product.
Yep.
And I was demonstrating the SquareD stuff, and this other system integrator represented GE, did a lot of GE work, and they had the Series 6 at the time. And they came out with the Genius IO right around 82. You're familiar with Genius, Sean?
Oh, I've heard that name. Yeah, I went up against that quite a bit, actually, but go ahead.
So this integrator had boxes, samples of the Genius IO. Genius looked like it's a brick that there's a remote IO in a brick. So it had the remote interface and the IO built in. It was kind of landmark in its time. Well, this integrator demo we had was just a shell. There was no circuit board in it. I thought it was the most amazing thing that it could actually process without having a circuit board in it. So I think it was another year or two before they actually came out with the product, but they were pitching it pretty heavy at the time. And to be honest, I don't even remember Alan Bradley being at the show.
They didn't do a lot of shows back then. And it's funny, but, today it's hard to think about, even in the late 90s, I actually threw together a BBS in the mid 90s because so many of my customers did not have internet access. Like, oh, my boss won't buy me an AOL account for $50 a month. Seriously, this was the mid to late 90s. That was the attitude. I'm like, dude, you need this file. You can't upload the program out of your basic module without this basic software. I'm not driving an hour across town, just dial into my BBS. You got a modem. Everybody has one in their computer. Just dial up and download it. It's free. So
Wow. What
it's like people were worried about long distance charges. Well, they won't let me call because basically if you called next door, it was long distance. It felt like back in the day, right? It was like 5 cents a minute if you were calling somebody in your zip code or area, in your prefix. But if you called like 2 miles down the road, if they were in a different prefix, then you were spending $10 a minute or something crazy like that.
That was crazy. I remember. Yeah, those days were pretty crazy. It really, rocketed between the late 90s and early 2000s. I mean, the dot bomb, right? I mean, 2000s, 2001. It was really going gangbusters at that point.
Yeah, and so the dot-com boom, which became a bust in 2000, but the boom was great, and people were getting ISPs that weren't dial-up, right? So that was starting to come out, right? Cable modems were starting to come out. We DSL, and then cable modem still. If you had cable, then you got a cable modem. That changed the internet. I mean, trying to dial up with your 57.6K, or I'm sorry, 56.7. It's 56K. I always get confused with Data Highway Plus, but that was one thing. But once you had high speed, not like what we have today, but it's more than like 56K modem. You could watch video, and that's when YouTube starts becoming a thing, right? Because you can actually watch video over it. And much later and years later. But yeah, so people started .com. Everybody started talking about .com. Everybody started talking about the internet. Windows 95 had the browser built in, and it was just like people started getting. They didn't have to beg for internet access anymore.
Yeah, but it really didn't change the PLC itself too much.
Yeah. But changed the documentation. I'll tell you, I used to mail out early 90s. I was mailing out boxes of books to engineering firms, and then it'd be like, let me just send it a PDF.
These days, I don't even bother looking for manuals anymore. If you Google it, it's going to pull up the manual now because all of the search engines are using AI, and they'll pull it right out of the manual for you.
And I was this morning. I had a problem with the vendor's PLC, and I actually went to Google. I usually use a privacy browser, but I just was having a problem finding the answer. And their AI now integrated into their search engine is so good.
Yeah.
Whereas the search results were really bad, what their AI did by compiling all the search results and trying to answer my question actually provided a helpful answer. Didn't eventually work, but it's so like next generation, right? Searches with the AI versus not without AI.
Yeah. So I've got a PLC 580E on a rack in my office, and I still have some clients with PLC 5s, and I'm looking to bring on some people, and one of the things I want to do is I need you to connect to this PLC and put a program in it.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if you remember those PLCs, the 5s, they don't have an RJ45.
They do not.
They have a UAI. I think it's the
AUA.
Yep. Yeah, and then you have to get a converter for that. So and then it also has a 25-pin serial,
of course. Yes,
and then a few DH plus, around DH plus, and then a couple of connectors. But that's kind of one of my exams I'm going to give to people. It's like, okay, here's a bag of stuff. Connect to it. Load me a program. Get this thing on. I still have clients with them, and we were talking about network speeds. I'm still dealing with a lot of DH plus networks with clients, and you're putting control logics on it, and your programs aren't 17K anymore. They're, control logic programs, could get pretty big, and you're trying to put it over that 57K dial-up type speed, and we've had some walk up on us. So you got to be really cautious. And I'm dealing with refineries, with equipment, it doesn't go down. That you got to be very careful. But paralleling in Ethernet and converting to that is making a huge difference for that. And control logics has actually become kind of the driving force behind some of these conversions, because you can't back up the program over the network if you're going to try and do it over DH+. You can. Technically, you can. But watch out. I've had DHRIO cards lock up.
Well,
that's not fun.
I remember we worked with the factory because we had a very important OEM who had some very large programs back in the, I'm going to say maybe the version 13, version 12 era. And trying to download them over a modem was painful. They actually had to change the download routine so it was smarter and thought more about bandwidth, right? It was thinking because it wasn't thinking about bandwidth. So I had to think about bandwidth. And then we ran into this again 10 years later with people who had wireless. And again, the programs keep getting bigger and bigger. And the download routine had to be modified in Logix to think more about being bandwidth friendly. You don't, it's great if you're on Ethernet, stuff everything through all at once. But if you're over a slower wireless, or maybe a 4G and not 5G, you just can't slam it all in at once. You got to send pieces down and do more error checking. And so, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's the market has changed. There's a lot more you could do, when I was talking with Robert Willis, the app guy for SquareD or Schneider in Houston, he was saying, years ago you could download programs to a SyMax PLC over a satellite link or a radio link. I had a fun control Logix.
I had a question. Robert Willis, is he still active?
Yes.
I guess people ask that about me, but as I integrated with Tricoms integrated with Schneider, I'm still the training manager up until 2021. And my colleagues down there say, there's this guy, Robert Willis. I think he knows this stuff. SquareD or way back.
Oh, he knows it. We had a fantastic
and he
conversation.
Was so approachable, and I hope he's still active. I hope he's still around.
Yes.
But I just remember hearing the name, and there's this guy. There's just guys like that will. Yeah, just Bob a call, and I spoke to him personally. Give me the. Oh my goodness.
We had a great conversation just a couple of weeks ago, and there was a SyMax had a product. I couldn't remember what it was. It was really unique and interesting product that went into the SyMax chassis. It was turned out the way I figured out what it was is I went on eBay and just searched for SquareD, and it was called a cell controller.
Oh.
And it would, it was a, slotted card, had its own interface for programming. I think it was built in where you could build data tables and program files and download it to the processor, whole routines, whole programs, interchange them. And, hence the name cell controller. I think it was, some automotive, company needed that type of flexibility. And it was one of those products. It's like, I got to figure out how to use, and there's so many cool things you could probably do with it, but I don't know what that is. And so then I had asked Robert Willis about it, and he goes, oh yeah, I know that product. And that's when he reminded me of all it could do, and he sent me some links to some information, but that's all paper manuals. I don't even know how many of those I even scanned for reuse. But yes, I mean, they had a speech module, so you could put in phrases and alarms and things. And
that's awesome.
Put it over a PA system. I forgot all about that one. Again, it had an Ethernet in '85. That was the coax version of Ethernet.
Yeah.
And then programs could transfer all the way up and down the program line without any modifications. That was pretty unique. The one thing that kind of wasn't very good is it had 8,000 registers, user registers, and it was just a flat register file, and you could use them any way you wanted, but they could be bits, they could be words, they could be floats, and you set them up, usually you'd just by organization. You would group them by function, but you could do anything with them. So the flexibility was tremendous.
Was it octal, decimal?
Decimal.
That's good. Good.
Yeah, it was there was no octal.
That was the
skill
thing, I think, with remote I/O. I was trying to teach people octal addressing. It's like there's no 8 and 9s, guys. That's all there is. No 8.
Single and double slot.
I actually thought that was easier, but when you use it a lot, right? I actually had a guy just took my ControlLogix course. He's like, Sean, when are you doing a PLC 5 course? I'm like, well, it's really not a priority. He's like, my plant's full of PLC 5s to this day. We only have a handful of ControlLogix. So I'm like, okay, yeah. But yeah, half slot, 1 slot, 2 slot.
Yeah, octal. I still have that argument. It's like I had somebody do a takeoff of a network, and I said, we got to work in octal. You can't work in decimal with the PLC addresses, because if you can use ours links, it's only going to show you octal.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to dial in node, let's say 68 or 69. So you can't have an 8.
That's too high. But I mean, yeah, you're not going to get 8 or 9.
Yep.
So all the conversions
77, right? 00 to 77.
So yeah, all the conversions I'm doing now, I add last octet is 1, like 23 would be the address, and I say if you need some extra addresses, you always got 8 and 9. 28, 29, 38, 39. Those are always free. I'm doing a lot of conversions right now.
Oh, really? All right. Yeah. Nice. So you're leaving even as you move them. Are you doing the IP addresses to match the old Data Highway Plus addresses, or are you keeping them on Data Highway?
Yeah, we've come up with a pretty unique way to migrate large networks, where we could keep some things on DH Plus and some on Ethernet, and then move them over, and just because certain things are still addressing the DH Plus address and then converting to, like, we're using live Digi1s. We're doing it DF1 to Ethernet IP. So in order to keep the addressing clean, we're using the DH Plus address as part of the last octet of the IP address.
That makes sense.
So 23 is 23 on either side. The
28 or 29. Yeah, got it.
Yeah. Then if you're going to add a panel view in, or a ProSoft module or something, you need to give it an IP. Give it one of those, because they're going to be free. You're not going to conflict.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, doing a lot of ANX4s. Those ProSofts.
Yes, I have one. I actually covered it in my show. They actually work pretty good. Have you had good success with them?
I probably put in 40 or 50 of them.
Wow.
No, probably more than that. Yeah.
Wow.
In a few different types of applications. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some things that they said it wouldn't do, which now they support.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes the marketing material gets ahead of the actual firmware.
Yeah, because we've had some cases where we weren't able to get Ethernet to the ControlLogix or compact Logix.
Yeah.
So we have to put an ANX in backwards.
Yeah.
Ethernet to the PLC, get it on Data Highway. It didn't support that up until last year sometime, I think. I pushed them hard to do that.
That's good. Well, and a lot of this is, and I don't know if you saw this, Gary, but a lot of this is customer driven. For instance, one of my pet peeves was always that Rockwell was not allowing the factory talk to convert 32-bit applications on a 64-bit OS. And I'm like, that's kind of silly, guys. There's no reason you should. And then they came out with Factory Talk View 10, and they can do it. But that was, from the stories I heard, not that I have firsthand knowledge, was pushed by customers. Big customers said, you need to add this feature. And so thank you for pushing ProSoft. We had them on the show, the product manager, and they sent us in a unit, which we covered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're a pretty good go-to company for us.
Yeah.
For a lot of stuff. There's a few competitive stuff, but we found that Help Digi continues to do the IAP. They keep threatening they've dropped support for Rockwell, but it's still in there.
Oh, were they bought by somebody, Digi?
I don't think so, but they got a new line but it doesn't support Rockwell.
Okay.
of, serial to Ethernet interfaces. And, it's a lot of it's pushing my client to get their systems off of serial computers.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. It's hard.
Yeah, it's extremely slow. Even data plus at 57.6 is 2,000 words per second, which if you have a couple dozen PLCs, it goes in a heartbeat, and then add some panel views, it's toast. There's no bandwidth.
So, yeah, and I had mentioned a comment to you, I think when we talked earlier, was one of the early days of PLC 5 and SyMax, was out. I was at a major brewery in Colorado,
Okay.
up in the mountains there, and they were evaluating SquareD and Alan Bradley, and we were touting the SyNet, how fast it was, and how well the peer network worked, all this stuff, and how the PLC 5 was going to have peer link, and it would collapse after, a handful of PLCs. Well, as I mentioned before, I think there was a third company, Maxitron, that they ended up going with. And I think it was a short-lived PLC system that was going to be landmark system and never really took off. So if you dig a little bit on the internet, you might be able to find Maxitron. Kind of a cool name, but
a very cool name. I like it, Maxitron.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, we're running out of time here. I want to pitch it over to Gary, though. Gary, in the last few minutes, any questions for Joe or any comments on what we talked about?
No, I just really appreciate both of you. And, I quickly went into my Wikipedia for the SquareD, of course, because we heard so much about it. I didn't really come into this industry till 95, right? Other industries before that, but just the legendary, the name, and, Schneider just is smart enough, was probably number 6 out of the big 6 companies, but they're probably 1 or 2 right now. But as those acquisitions of Monicon and these legendary SquareD are just pretty amazing. Eventually, Triconics and Wonderware, and the opportunities are at Schneider, and I think the opportunities in automation with upgrades. How many DOS systems do we still have out there?
Oh, not many.
Yeah, those I don't see too many, but
I would say too many. But
no. So I think what I said, this is okay. I'm coming close to the end of my career here in the next few years. Winding down, and there's still a lot of years left in automation, right? So we'll just see of it. So it's it's still an open market, and I think I think it's going to change a lot. It's moved slowly. Ladder is still a predominant language, but we're seeing a lot of movement towards other languages and get software version control and things like that. The younger generation and AI will play a role in automation.
Yeah, and I think I can say it's easy. It's easy today with Raspberry Pis and Arduinos. It's easy for kids to get into programming and doing automated control. And a lot of kids they've automated their plants, watering their plants, and security on their bedrooms, and they just make little robots. My grandson's one of these kids, and they love it. And this Lego League, and so trying to bring those kids up and say, hey, you should look at being a controls engineer, because then you get to not just make a little robot. You get to control real robots instead of making real cars and cement and consumer products and all the good stuff we get to work on.
Yeah, and they're all hacking their e-bikes so they could go over 20 miles an hour. So they're learning electric, they're learning software, they're learning some of the best controls guys I've ever worked with, some of the best engineers, all worked on their cars when we were in college. Those were the guys that understood all the hydraulics, all the electrical, all that, and carried on
later.
Yeah.
Like, we need a retro line of cars so kids can get back into working on them. I worked on all my
e-bikes. It's e-bikes. Is where it's going to be.
Yeah. Some of them look like really cool. I'm like, that looks like a motorcycle. It's an e-bike. And I'm like, actually, I want one of those.
Yeah, I was listening to some the other day. They were talking about how kids know how to hack them, so because they're speed limited.
Yeah.
It's not hard to modify it. It's, okay, now one of the things early when I was interviewing for a job out of college, I think it was Panduit was the company. Said we buy machine. The first thing we do is we break the warranty because we want them to run at 120%. And I was at a client the other day that they had to modify their OEM machine because it wasn't working the way they wanted it. And it's like, okay, we're breaking the warranty. Yeah, go for it.
Just always remember to get a copy of the code. Don't let your OEM lock you out of the code. Always get a copy.
I say this, I always start with as found. And then I make a second save as left.
That's smart.
And then I work on as left during the day.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know we're running up against the time limit here, but really appreciate you sharing all the stories about, when you get into the industry and some of the products you used, and a lot of them I've never touched, and I know Gary has never touched. So it's great to, and it's so interesting in the pre-show. Joe was talking about how he's running into Triconics in a lot of different places over the years, and to hear that Gary actually had talked to the expert you were just talking to down in, I think it was down in Texas. So what a small, really a small industry. But Joe, I'm going to just pitch it over to you for the final word. Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Sean, Gary, it's a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on. Gary, I've seen your book. I don't have it. I probably should pick it up because I have a long history with Wonderware too, and some of the people over there, and like I said, running them with Triconics. And Sean, I've been following your LinkedIn stuff. So thank you. Keep it up.
Well, thank you guys all. Until next time. Peace.
All right.
Thank you
Go
so
Bears.
much.